Welcome to Jets Rewind. I'm Marty Schupak in Valley Cottage, New York, and I'm joined by my good friends and partners, Ray Clifford in Marysville, Ohio, and Ralph Sharega underneath the palm trees in Sarasota, Florida. How you guys doing?
I just got hit in the head with a coconut.
Oh, there you go. Your head looks
I
like
want to be where Ref is.
yeah. Of course, I'm getting a call from Rob August. It never fails. But listen, guys, this is a huge week.
Huge.
I mean, even if we know we're on a losing streak, but if you asked us back, and Ralph had mentioned this in the last show back in August, would you sign for this? I think all three of us would. We'd rather be in a position where we could determine our own destiny. But of course, the Patriots are involved. We're going to get to that in a couple of minutes. We didn't do a show because I was under some physical duress and pain. I want to thank Ralph Sharega and also Dr. John, the late Sarno, who's helped me with my back. It's just phenomenal. I'm like 99%. I'm like ahead of Brees Hall. I'm ready to go this Sunday. So with that, Ralph, I think you have a trivia question, right?
Yeah, I do. So hearkening back to the Pete Carroll year with the New York Jets, which was actually kind of a similar year. They were 6-5, and then they lost their last 5 straight games. You probably remember. Anyway, on that roster, there were 2 players who ended up in the Hall of Fame. Can you name them?
On the Jets?
The Pete Carroll year in the Jets.
Barely remember the Pete Carroll year. It was only.
Well, I'm pretty sure I know one of them. We're going to come back to this?
Yeah.
Okay, let me write it down. I know one of them. I'm pretty sure of that.
What year was he there again?
94.
94.
The other one to me is very obvious. The other one,
I can't even remember 94 right now.
I think it's one of Ralph's trick questions. But anyway, guys,
Sort
a
of.
lot has happened this week. Zach Wilson keeps bouncing back and forth, and now he went from number 1 quarterback. He's going to be inactive. Mike White got cleared. I guess he found a doctor probably on General Hospital that cleared him. And he's going to be wearing some sort of flap jacket. And I'm very excited. The only negative going into this weekend, and I'm in New York with the Jets playing at 4:15, and the Patriots and the Dolphins are on at 1:00. I won't get to see that because they're going to have the Giant game on, which is the one time of the year I wish the Giants weren't on at 1:00. But go into this weekend, Ray. How do you feel with Mike White at quarterback right now?
Well, obviously better than I did with Zach Wilson going for the quarterback or Strevler, which I like Strevler. He's one of those guys you cheer for, but we had no prayer of winning with him in there. I mean, you can only do so many quarterback runs before they start playing that. And so I'm hoping it's kind of like when he came into the Chicago game this year and when he came in for the Bengal game the other year, that kind of bumps everybody up, and he has. Okay.
Ray, you mentioned Strevler, and I think I'm guessing we're all on the same page that we kind of like parts of what we saw, but he really doesn't have any sort of arm. With that said, do you think the Jets, and of course Flacco will be the number 2, do you think they should activate all 3 for this week's game up in Seattle?
Well, yeah, only because Flacco's so immobile as well that I could see where you might fear that both him and White could go down, and then what do you do?
Exactly.
So yeah, I could see him doing that. The only, I caught the part of the game when Strevler came in, and all I can say is if he hadn't underthrown Uzomah by a mile, that game could have been very interesting, because that could have changed the whole atmosphere of everything about that
Thank
game.
God he barely reached him. That would have been a tragedy. The guy was only 50 yards
Oh,
open.
I know. He was open by so much, but he had to dive just to catch that pass.
Right. And Ralph, what's your feeling about activating all 3?
I agree with Ray. I worry very much with that offensive line. I sent a text to you earlier in the week. The thing I worry about most with Mike White is I want him to be standing for both these games so we get a real good idea of what this guy has. And I feel like one good shot into the midsection, and he's going to be carting it off to the locker room again. So yeah, I think they should keep all three of those guys in there, which is a real testament to that offensive line. Marty, it's funny. There's so much talk about Wilson, and understandably, because the whole situation is like insane. I've been following football for 60 years. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this with a second pick so quickly. I mean, I know there have been some horrific. Bradshaw was horrific for his first couple of years, and he did get benched. But this is, being, not even dressing and going back and forth. But I think it sort of clouds the fact that their offensive line is so horrible. I don't hear enough people talking about it. It is so bad.
They just want to throw the blame on Zach for everything,
Right.
which drives me a little nuts.
Well, I want to mention it, and I was going to bring it up. I had a question. In what order, and I'm going to name 4 things, has this slide been have influenced this slide the biggest? Has it been Zach Wilson, offensive line, the defense, Robert Saleh, which includes the
LaFleur
clock management against the Lions, and Mike LaFleur? And you could say it's a tie for first. I don't care, but I'm just curious what you think. Go, Ralph. Why don't you start?
I think it's Zach Wilson. It's so bizarre when you watch Streveler, and the minute he got in the game, the energy. I don't know what explains that. Did you see these players just like get excited? It was really bizarre. I mean, obviously, like Ray said, that could only work for so long because Streveler, has a high school quarterback arm. But I don't get it. I think Mike White nearly got killed a couple of weeks ago because the offensive line is terrible. But yet, both he and Streveler, at times, they do get the ball out of their damn hands. And Zach Wilson, he's like a deer in the headlights. And as the great Joe Montana said, and I always make this quote, 3/4 of quarterbacking is from the neck up, and Wilson doesn't have it. And every time I hear someone say, well, Mike White doesn't have the talent that Zach Wilson has, he doesn't have the physical talent, but from the neck up, he's more talented. So I don't want to hear that anymore.
Okay, Ray, what do you think about my list, which has been the biggest influence of the Jets' losing streak right now? You could be a tie.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I think anybody saying other than Zach Wilson's kind of not really watching. I mean, we have other deficiencies that are very clear, but Zach is the main one. I mean, even Flacco, as bad as he's been, made the team look a little better when he was in there. And I feel bad, but I think I honestly didn't think Zach was going to be on the field again. And there's a reset that Sal was talking about. I think that was to carry into next year, really, or until they were officially out of the playoffs, so that he could really work with them. There was no way he was going to reset and be an NFL quarterback in 3 weeks. So right now he's a mess. So
right,
it's him.
All right, and I want to your reaction. I'll start with Ray. A couple of stats I came across. The Jets have used an empty backfield 14.1% of their offensive plays, which is first in the NFL. The league average is 8.2%. On third down plays, 30% of their plays is with an empty backfield, and the league average is 15.2%, and they're leading that. Ray, what's your thought on this empty backfield? Because we were going crazy with this a couple of weeks ago.
Well, 2 things come to mind. One is, that's a little high. I don't understand LaFleur's thinking on that in certain situations. The other is that since we can't seem to run the ball and gain half a yard on third and whatever, that I think he feels better with the empty backfield. But the only time I have a problem with that is when you're down around the goal line or so, and you can't, you don't have the guy under center, was when I don't like the empty backfield. Like we did in Minnesota there for a couple plays. But overall, I think it tells you how little confidence they have in our offensive line or our running backs to get a half a yard or a yard to get us a first down. Because I think a lot of that percentage comes from when we get into third and short and we don't we don't do anything, so they go some other route.
Right. Okay, Ralph, I want you to put on your Ali Sherman hat with the same question. Remember that show, Ralph?
Inside Giants football.
That's right.
Yeah. I'm on the opposite with Ray. I think part of the reason the third down thing is they do it so much is because I have never seen a team have more third and ridiculously longs than this team.
That's
And
true,
because
too.
of that, the other team is going to only rush light, and they're dropping all these guys back, and the Jets end up with a dump off. But am I still there?
You're here. Go ahead. No, I hear you. I'm just trying to look at the agenda, which I shut off my phone. So Ralph, you could chime in with the next on the agenda if you want. But I can ask you a question or just give you everyone an update that Denzel Mims is back at practice today. I don't know about Jeff Smith. I haven't heard anything. I sent you guys some stats with the offensive line, the amount of money spent. The Jets have spent more money on their offensive line than any team in the NFL, $47.5 million. Followed by the Cardinals, $44.2 million, followed by Denver Broncos, $42.8 million, followed by the Indianapolis Colts, $42 million. It's interesting.
It's painful.
After the Jets, those teams, they're all terrible. It's just unbelievable. So maybe we have it all wrong. But Ralph, go ahead. What's next on the agenda, if you have it in front of you, which we'll address?
Well, I guess the thing that fascinates me is that they're Jets playing Seattle this weekend. We think that the Jets had this historic draft class, which they have, but it might not even be the best draft class this year. And I wanted to compare and see which we think has the better draft class, Seattle or the Jets.
Go through Seattle's picks. Let's go through each pick in each round, and then we could have a comparison.
All right. Well, Seattle's first pick was the 9th pick, right? It was Charles Cross. He got picked right before Wilson.
That was the offensive lineman.
Yeah, from Mississippi State.
He's been starting all year.
He's started. He's been in 7 games and started all 7. I don't know if he's had injuries or what, but he has started when he's played. Then they didn't have a. Then they had 2 back-to-back picks in the second round, kind of a couple of picks after the Jets picked Breece Hall. And they went with Boyce Moff, one of your guys, Marty. You liked him. And then with the next pick, they picked Kenneth Walker III, who's a very good
running back.
He's had a very good year. I think Breece Hall's better than he is, but he's one of the better ones. They also got Abraham Lucas, I think, in the 3rd round, a tackle from Washington State or Washington, and he's started every game he's played this year. So they got bookend tackles. Then they got Cody Bryant, what's his name, Sauce Gardner's cornerback, fellow cornerback at Cincinnati, and he's actually played well. By the way, Boyce Moff's statistics are pretty similar to Jermaine Johnson's. And then the biggest steal in the draft in the 5th round, they got Tariq Woolen.
That's unbelievable, Tariq Woolen, and I liked him.
Yeah, a lot of people did, but nobody had the balls to take him.
You know what? He reminded me too much like Vernon Golston. I don't know why. Like the guy was like off the charts physically, but he's got such long arms, right?
He's taller than Sauce. He's 6'4".
Yeah.
He's had 6 interceptions, 14 pass defenses. Sauce has had 2 interceptions, 16 pass defenses. It's a tough call. I don't know. Who do you think had the better draft?
Well, just because I don't know, I see the Jets more, obviously. I would say probably the Jets probably did, though, injuries hit them in Breece Hall and also with Max Mitchell, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But they scored a lot. I mean, with Garrett Wilson, with Sauce Gardner. But you're right, though. It's very similar. It's eerie similar, in fact, when you really look at it. So, Ray, what would you think?
Oh, I think our draft was better. I mean, well, you were saying about, was it Woolen that went, what would you say, the 5th round?
Yeah.
I think if we'd have drafted Vernon Golston, nobody'd care if he was a bust in the 5th round. So, I think, but They were talking about Woolen and comparing him with Sauce a little bit on the radio, and the one thing they brought up was that nobody throws at Sauce, so
Right.
he'd probably have a lot better stats if they were actually challenging him more, or it might, expose something, but I don't think it would necessarily. He's looked every bit the part. No, but they've had a good draft, but we actually, I think we had a starter in Max Mitchell up until he went out with the injury and then came back and had the clots and everything. I think we'll see next year if he's for real, but that was a late round steal.
And also Michael Clemens, we forget
and
about
Clemens,
him,
yeah. So I think our draft overall was definitely a better one. But theirs was good. It's not like, theirs wasn't a solid draft that both of us could be, relying on these guys for years. So.
Yeah, Ralph, if the Jets win the last two games, whether they make the playoffs or not, and let's say Mike White has 2 TDs, 1 interception, 1 game, 3 TDs, and 1 interception, another. What do you think is a fair contract that he might sign next year? He's a free agent.
Boy, you talk money talk. That's I don't know. They'll have to sign him, but I don't know. 15 million.
I mentioned to Ray something like 3 years, 25 million. He thought it was too much. 15
25 a year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
25 a year.
That's too much. Yeah. I think 17 or 18 is the most I'd go, because I don't think any team's going to offer him some huge contract based on, his amount of time, but he'll get some offers.
It has happened. It has happened with guys who come in and
I'm going to tell you why I'm going to disagree. Because, and I think part of the panic is, I was thinking about it earlier, the fact, is this the first year they extended the playoffs or the second year?
Second
year. Whatever it is, though, these owners, general managers, and coaches, I've never seen a quarterback shuffle this late in the season, what's going on right now. And we're going to get into the Derek Carr situation. It was announced by the Commanders that Carson Wentz is now going to start for Washington. So I just think
it's fascinating.
These owners are just crazed about, and they have a right to be the quarterbacks. I could see someone coming up and giving.
I think that bubble's bursting though, because there's too much money going out where if the guy doesn't pan out, you're killing your. Look at what has happened with Russell Wilson. They are married to that guy for the next 3 years, and if they can't even cut him, trade him, anything, or they're just and they trade away a bunch of picks, and which it won't with Mike White. Picks aren't an issue, but you don't want to kill your salary cap if you miss on the quarterback, and that's starting to come back the other way, I think.
Well, you're putting more logic. I'm going by the emotions. I'm being serious.
I know, I get it, but.
And I just see these owners that think that they know more than general managers. They're sitting down and say, geez, this Mike White. Man, he stays upright.
Mike White.
Yeah, it's just I think we're undervaluing him if it's like in the 13 to 15 million range. I think it's going to be more like 17 to 23. Now that depends upon if he does well. I'm not sure. Ralph, next question's for you. Okay, I was thinking of turning point plays from the year. I came up with 3, and I just want you to put them in order. You ready?
Okay.
John Franklin Myers roughing the passer. C.J. Mosley going off sides. Braxton Berrios dropping the Vikings touchdown pass.
Marty, you're ruining my day.
Which do you think is the biggest turning point of the year?
What happened to the Marcus Jones punt return? Didn't make it.
Well, that goes, that's true too. But go ahead. Go by those 3.
Oh geez. Turning points within the game or in the season?
Both.
Well, in the game, I would definitely think that John Franklin Myers was the dagger. That cost them the game, and I knew it the minute it happened. I just said to myself, I let out such a shriek that my dog got frightened because I knew that was the game. Right?
You know, it's funny, Ray, and Ralph knows this. When you watch the Jets, there are certain codes or that happen, and then you just know the end of the game. When The Jets recovered that fumble against Jacksonville, and they only scored 3 points instead of a touchdown. It was over. We knew it was
Yeah.
over.
You thought, oh, here it is. Here's our chance to put our, to take over the game. And it was pathetic too. It was like 2 crappy runs and a sack. It was like, this team's got no chance.
Right. All right. So you say for the game was it John Franklin Myers.
Yeah.
Now, for this season, would you think there was Mosley or Barrios? Mosley, right? When did that happen? In the Buffalo game?
That happened in the Detroit game, and actually that other play I thought was the killer play in the Detroit game. The pass to the tight end.
I thought the Buffalo game was when Mosley jumped the line.
I think it was. Yeah.
Was it the Buffalo game? Yeah, you're right. It was the Buffalo game. Yes.
Right. Well, which do you think was the bigger dagger, the Mosley or the Barrios drop?
The Barrios.
Ray?
Oh yeah, because Barrios was the game. You didn't. There was no guarantee we were going to stop him, or what was going to happen after the Mosley thing. If he hadn't jumped, we didn't know. But with Barrios, you knew we were taking the lead, at least if he'd held on. Minnesota, there was still what, 4 minutes left and something?
No, there was like about a minute and a half left.
Very low. Yeah.
The way Minnesota's year is gone, that was probably still too much time, but who knows?
Yeah.
Well, would they have had to have scored a touchdown? I lost track. No, they would have. No. They could have kicked the field goal. Yeah.
All right. Okay, moving along.
That was depressing.
with Seattle, they made a couple of trades, and the Jamal Adams trade and the Russell Wilson trade. Which was the bigger ripoff, do you think? Was it the Jamal Adams trade with the Jets or the Russell Wilson trade with Denver? Ray?
Oh, they fleeced Denver so far. They got a lot of picks, and they
got Noah Fant.
Yeah, they got a lot of picks. They Wilson, I think, is good in the right system, and whatever that was that Nathaniel Hackett was running, wasn't it? But they can build on that for years, and who knows if they would have ended up giving Wilson the same kind of contract. Probably not, but they got everything from Denver. From they gave up a lot to get Adams from us, but at least they got somebody who, if he's on the field, you never know if he's going to get injured.
He's never on the field. He never was with the Jets.
But if he was, at least he was producing, unlike
Right. Okay, and Ralph, what do you think? What do you think is the bigger ripoff? Because I think it's not even close. It's the Russell Wilson trade.
Well, I was never a huge Russell Wilson fan. I thought he was a product of a really strong organization. I still think they can get some production out of him. He's not that old, and if they get a decent coach, whereas I think Jamal Adams is never going to play a full season. I think players like that, Marty. They just never can hang around. And he plays a position which is not nearly as impactful. But yeah, I would say the Russell Wilson one.
Right. Okay. I want to get into Derek Carr, but before we do, somebody I was listening to the radio, and this guy called in. He had an interesting topic. He said he asked the host if he thought that John Franklin Myers is going to get cut in the offseason, and the host said yes. And that got me thinking that if the Jets had a choice of cutting John Franklin Myers or Carl Lawson, who would they cut?
I assume Lawson's making more money. So
he's making 15, and I think John Franklin Myers make like 11 or 12.
I hadn't thought about that. Who do I think they would cut? I hadn't thought about Franklin Myers. He was having a pretty good year. I think overall Lawson's a little more effective than he is. But I don't know what goes on in the locker room. That of course that one play is, to me, like ruined the season.
Yeah. Okay, Ray, what's your thoughts on that?
I don't see him cutting Myers, because one thing is he's a little more he's got a little more flexibility. They can move him to the inside. I don't see him ever doing that with Lawson, but they could do that with Myers. I think if either of them goes, I think it will be Lawson personally. I think they like Myers, and he is a little more cap friendly. So I don't see him.
Right.
I'd be surprised.
Right. Okay. Right before we went on the air, it came across, and I think Ray sent it to me that the Las Vegas Raiders are benching Derek Carr. They're going to start. I guess it's Stidham, the former
Stidham.
Patriot.
Stidham, yeah.
Stidham, the former Patriot, who I don't know much about. I think I saw him play once. But can this be it for Derek Carr? And could he be a possibility if Mike White doesn't work out, signing with the Jets? Now, keep in mind, he will be, I think, 32 in March. The thing that I like about Derek Carr, he misses very few games. He's only missed 2 in 9 years. The one scary part, though, is the last year and this year, his interceptions have gone up a lot. So let's start with Ralph. What do you think about this Derek Carr situation? And plus, and I mentioned that there's according to Mike Florio, there's a $40.4 million guarantee if he, I guess, passes a physical, like right after the Super Bowl.
Right.
So they
I think that's too much money. I don't think Douglas is going to invest it in a guy who didn't have a really good year this year. He's had some big time years. But no, I don't think he would be nearly the top priority for them as far as quarterback next year.
Okay, Ray, what's your feeling? Derek Carr.
He wouldn't be my first choice, but there are a couple of things about him. One, he has a no trade clause, so they can't just trade him wherever. The other is, if they were to release him before that February deadline, there's only like a $5 point something million hit to their cap, as opposed to after that it would be in the 40 range. So if they can't trade him, they may cut him, which would make things a little more flexible and a little more possible. But if they were to trade for him, I'd say we need to get them to pay a bit of his salary.
Yeah.
Well, let's just say, forget about the trade or whatever. Let's say he was cut. Is he a guy you would like to see in the green and white, Ray? If we could sign.
Well, like I say, he wouldn't be my first choice, but I wouldn't be. I mean, I think we could do. I mean, I think it could be worse. I mean, he shows that he can, make plays. I think he's a little. Well, he'd be an upgrade from where we are now compared to Zach. I don't know about an upgrade. He's more mobile than Mike White, and I think he might fit our system pretty well.
Who would be your first choice? Would it be Minshew? Sure. Gardner Minshew?
Yeah, I like the only thing I have against Minshew is his height, and then because he's somebody who apparently Michael Floor has a problem with getting guys out of the pocket who do well on the run, because that's where Zach's been his best, and he never gets them out of the pocket. So, but I think Minshew would be a good pick. I like Garoppolo, but he gets hurt too much. But he's the one who's perfect for the system. But we need somebody who's going to be on the field more than he is, I think. So that's the problem with Garoppolo. So yeah, I'd say Minshew, but Carr would be good enough in my mind next. I don't know who else is available at this point, but of those 3, I'd say, yeah.
There's a lot of guys like Tyler Henke and Jacoby Brissett, and there's a ton of guys. I think Daniel Jones actually is going to be a free agent this year.
They're going to sign him.
Yeah. Probably.
The Giants, they have to sign him.
He's done really well, actually.
I think he has too. I think he's. I'll tell you, if they cut, I would love him on the Jets. I think he's real good.
If you look at his stats compared to what his first few years under Daboll, he's already improved immensely. They just aren't going to franchise him.
And they have no receivers, Ralph. I
think they'll sign him, and if they didn't, I would take him too. I've always kind of liked Daniel Jones. The first time we ever saw him was in that preseason game where he hit his first 11 passes. They'd never played before, and I was like, oh man! And Darnold was struggling on the other side.
Right. And by the way, speaking of Sam Darnold, he's got a huge game coming up this week against.
He's a free agent too.
Ray's favorite, Tom Brady. Which should be interesting. But look, we're going to start to close this out. But before we do, I want to get
Baker Mayfield's a free agent too.
Yes, I want to get to the offensive line. Then we're going to do Ralph's trivia question. But quickly, this week against the Seattle Seahawks, and we don't really bet and we don't get into it, but I just would like your opinion. I'll start with Ray. Garrett Wilson, 69.5 yards receiving, over under. What would you take?
I'm going to go with the over with Mike White in there.
Ralph, what would you take?
I would definitely lay it on the over. Definitely.
That's what I would do too. Okay, offensive line. I sent you guys a list. Free agency this year: George Fant, Connor McGovern, Dan Feeney, Nate Herbig, Cedric Ogbuehi, Mike Remmers, Drew Samia. They are all set to be unrestricted free agent. In that list, is there anyone in particular I want to concentrate on? Connor McGovern. Would you re-sign him, Ralph? We'll make an attempt to re-sign him.
Not a huge Connor McGovern fan, but I think I would, because I feel like the Jets have so many holes to fill in their offensive line that at least with him, you get someone who's going to be okay. I mean, if they can dump, and if they can, that means they can dump Laken Tomlinson and fill that hole, because he's making a lot more and he's not as good as McGovern, at least this year. So I would say yes. Not an overly enthusiastic yes, but a yes.
Ray, what's your feeling about Connor McGovern?
That whole list, I could take it or leave it. If they think they want to keep one or two of them, that's fine. But, I don't want to keep any of them as a starter at this point. To me, any of those guys, if they bring them back, would be, in my mind, more fillers. And I want to see them upgrade to definitely starters over them. So I don't have anybody in mind, because I didn't like anybody you named, honestly.
Well, I except for the last two games, I thought Nate Herbig was doing well. I don't know what happened the last two games.
Yeah.
His
well, like I say, I don't mind him, but I don't think I want him back as a starter.
Right. Definitely a depth player. I'm fine with him.
I like him as a depth guy.
Ralph, do you think
he actually played well at center when he had to fill in as a depth guy? So,
if you remember, Ralph, that was my idea about 4 weeks ago, possibly moving him to center.
Yeah.
If you move on from McGovern. But I don't want to relive the past, but do you guys think it was a mistake letting Morgan Moses go? I mean, Baltimore signed him for 3 years, $15 million, Ray?
Not that I know of. Has he had some outstanding season? I mean, I don't
he
know.
hasn't started a game, but he's played in more than half the snaps in every game.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Marty, if the minute they put on a Jet uniform, they suddenly become
they forget how to
become turnstiles. I don't know what it is.
That's right. It's funny. You look at this list, and under contract for 23, they have Laken Tomlinson, $17.3 million.
That's ridiculous.
Mekhi Becton, 5.8, Dwayne Brown, 11.5, Elijah Verataka, 4.3 million, Max Mitchell, 1 million, George Sinat, 900.
Greg Sinat.
Greg Sinat.
Greg Sinat.
From Wagner.
Wagner by way of Queens, New York.
Yeah.
But it's interesting about that list. If somehow, some way, Elijah Verataka comes back the way he played, and if Mekhi Becton somehow, and we don't trust him, comes back the way it was thought he would play, their offensive line is not in awful shape with Max Mitchell off the bench.
Well, that's true. The Mekhi Becton, of course, is the key. And when you look at those numbers and you see Mekhi Becton getting 5 point whatever million, 5.8 million, you realize, they're going to keep him next year because he's not that expensive. When you look at him compared to Laken Tomlinson, who was awful this year. I mean, obviously they can't assume that he's going to hold down one of the tackle positions. They'll be making a big mistake. I looked at Seattle's draft. They drafted 2 tackles in the first 3 rounds. The Jets, they got to draft a couple of offensive linemen in the first 3 rounds. They just have to do it.
Well, the good news is, Ralph, I started looking at the draft list. There's a lot of tackles this year. There aren't a lot of top 15 tackles, but you could get tackles in the second and third round.
That's good. That's what they need.
That's fine with me too. I mean, this idea that they've got to be in the top 10 or something to be any good is just, ridiculous, because look at Max Mitchell. I mean, we thought he was just some filler piece, and he was actually playing one of the best linemen we had there for a while, other than Vera Tucker. So We
Right.
can pick one up. They just the second round, third round, just get some in there.
It's just, again, I say it every week, the gosh darn injuries. The last 3 years, it's just
Yep.
been unbelievable. It just really has been unbelievable. And with the
I think this
injuries,
is on the NFL. I think
know,
this is all about
but-
the limited practice crap they
right,
do in preseason.
right, we are on the same page with that, but you look at their injuries and how depleted, and those stats I gave you, the empty backfield, I don't know what Michael Floor's thinking. To be very honest, I don't get it
Yeah,
now.
I don't know what he's thinking in a lot of ways.
We all wonder a bit.
But he's one of the best young talents in the league, as all these announcers who don't do the Jet games regularly say.
Right. Okay. Let's. We're going to close this out. Ralph, go back to the trivia question, and I think I got one. Go ahead.
So Pete Carroll, for young Jet fans, was the Jets coach. It was his first head coaching job for 1 year in 1994. They ended up 6-10, which in this day and age, if you're a Jet coach, gets you a 5-year extension. But on that roster, there were 2 players who went into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Can you name them?
I got one. I say Ronnie Lott is one of them.
Ronnie Lott is correct.
I don't know who the other
All
one.
right, Ray, the pressure is on you.
I'll take a guess, and this is along the same line. Art Monk.
Yes.
Oh yes.
All right.
Good.
It took me a while. I only remember that about.
By the
I'll tell
way,
you, the Jets with that homegrown talent, they're amazing.
Just so you guys know, Art Monk from White Plains and White Plains High School, which is about 10 miles from where I sit. So he's a local guy. So, hey, look, with that, we're going to close it out. It's a very exciting weekend coming up. We all have to put in our Dolphins hat for the 1 o'clock game. And then we're going to sit back and watch the Jets as Mike White is going to try to lead us to a victory. So until next time, for Ray Clifford, Ralph Schrager, and I'm Marty Schupak, let's go Jets.